cybersecurity and privacy compliance in a public cloud, and code-based cybersecurity. The industry is going towards, on one hand, government is pressing us and our clients are pressing us to do more in terms of compliance and prove that the services that we provide are secured. From another side, government is pressing us to comply with certain regulations or implement frameworks. So we are going to be talking about that. And also, I wanted to ask anybody to either unmute and ask questions or share opinions, or you could just send messages in the chat, and we'll pause and reply. Today, AWS is with us, and Sophos, and we are going to be discussing new trends and where the industry is going and where clients are going, and what we should be concentrating on next. So this is the agenda. I don't know if I have to tell you subject, but we'll just go through it. So it will be me, Michael Petrov, CEO and the founder of Digital Edge, and it will be Sean Wang from AWS and Ralph Bryan, as Greg said, from Sophos. And let's just go. So we'll speak a little bit about industry trends, and I will probably go a little bit beyond this slide because there are a few things going on recently. So organization wants to better understand how general security and data protection works on the cloud. So we see larger organizations, and we have lots of partners here. So we just wanted to share industry kind of overview from like technology perspective with our partners. We have a few clients, but it's basically the same. But the idea is that when there is an organization is larger, they basically say, okay, we don't know if we are secured or we are not secured. And we like asking question, I mean, how do you guys check? And they don't even know how to check. And there are a few simple answers how to check if you are secured, if data is protection, how secure you are, how mature the organization is, and we will give these answers throughout this presentation. But basically, some organizations don't even know where they are. Like IT is doing something, and executives are doing something, and there is a huge disconnect in between, and there is no way for them to verify where they are. And what we see in the startup world, it's again, startups are running to create a product, and they give a lot of power to programmers and product managers and organization when they are raising like next round of capitals, or they already have an MVP and they wanted to go on market. Their clients are asking, okay, guys, how secure you are? And there is nothing for them to say because they asking programmers, and programmers are saying, oh, we are secure, we are on AWS or whatever it is, and certainly not enough for the organization to prove that the organization is secure. Second point here, many security vendors are moving their virtual appliances to cloud to offer security as a service model. And we had conversation with one of our partners that the trend in the industry is that everything is month to month, everything is subscription based. There is no perpetual thing. There is no more. It's impossible to buy and forget about it. So it's all subscription services. Sometimes software vendors are disconnecting on-prem offers altogether. This is kind of to make more money and stay competitive. Sometimes our clients don't like it because they got used to the notion that they buy a thing, a box, a piece of software, and it's forever. But with velocity of today deployment and production cycles, we see that everything is moving to as a service model. And the more you're integrated with this as a service model, the more you up to next trends, and if you cannot support this model, it will be harder and harder for you to be competitive, especially in in AWS cloud and in Azure, or some private cloud implementation. Everything is month to month. So for example, if you're running your VMware, most of the pricing will be month to month. Security appliances, security products, month to month. You could commit to yearly and get a little bit discount, but there is no, I would say, there is no perpetual model at all in the industry, or maybe there is, but it'll go away. Organizations are persuaded to meet new security requirements such as Gdpr. GDPR is one example, but again, we went to the point when we have a cybersecurity lawyer on staff at Digital Edge, and clients asking, what do we have to do in this particular situation, in that particular situation, and there are different jurisdictions, and it's very complex. And when nothing happens, companies need to be prepared to comply with certain things. But when something happens, for example, cybersecurity breach, people start running around and like not understanding what is going on, what needs to be done. I was running lectures for organization called ISACA. This is risk and compliance professionals organization. And one of the questions in the quiz that I give them, what do you do during the breach? And the correct answer, go to your policies and procedures. So policies and procedures should define what to do in the case of any breach. And for example, if you're in New York and your breach affected more than a certain amount of records with the privacy, you have to notify Attorney General. And if you're operating in different states, it's even more complex. So you need to be prepared to be legally responsible for certain things. Or if we are talking about our partners and communication with our partners, we have to convey to our clients that something happens. You need to have clearly defined plan, who to notify, and almost like when cybersecurity companies saying that you need to have two teams in any incident response. One should be like understanding what's going on, and another is trying to defend perimeters and kind of block. So there are two teams working together, but in a little bit different directions. So I would say that there is a need for a third person or a third team to figure out the communication, and because when something happens and you declare an incident, the clock is ticking. You have to comply with certain government requirements, and these requirements need to be documented and followed. So these are the challenges, but there are certainly more challenges. And one of the biggest challenges that we see, and it's not on this slide, is that agility of public cloud, of the deployments and configurations. And as I mentioned, in startup world, too much power is given to development and product teams, and one DevOps can basically click something on web interface and put the whole company out of compliance with like one little mistake. And it's very easy to make a mistake. So it could be just operational mistake, or it could be like someone would just uncheck something accidentally because it's just a browser. Or it could be that developers don't have understanding of cybersecurity compliance requirements, and they would not just implement it and or overlooked. And the problem is public cloud is taking probably 50% of responsibilities for cybersecurity controls in the compliance, but other 50 because change management becomes so easy. The change to apply change is so easy. You log in, you click, and change is done. It's very hard to control that change, and it's very hard to control this environment from the compliance perspective. And we see that in traditional enterprise world, we have policies, we have procedures. If you need to change something, you do need to go to, you open a ticket, you open an access to a data center, you go there, you implement the change at night. With AWS, a good thing, mostly good thing, but also a very dangerous thing is that anyone can just go there and apply that change. And this velocity of cloud change creates such a big challenge for cybersecurity professionals that we cannot continue working the same way. We need to figure out some kind of cybersecurity automation to verify that we are in compliance, to verify that we constantly stay with the posture and maturity level as we declare in the in our compliance documentation. And with ease and velocity of changes in the cloud, it becomes a very challenging task. And this is where automation take place. And some companies, they're so behind on the aspect of automation because they know that they can open the GUI and just click. So it's another. And Sophos and AWS have cybersecurity products that allow to control and make sure that there are guardrails that no DevOps or admins can go through and put the company off the out of the compliance. So let's talk about cybersecurity and compliance and why they're important. So Digital Edge is pushing this notion through all our clients that laws and regulations do not expect us that do not expect that companies information security would prevent them from all possible incidents. So if there is an incident and you did everything by books and everything was configured correctly, you will not be sued, you will not be prosecuted, no penalties, and you will be able to explain what happens, and no harm will be done. Also, cybersecurity standards do not guarantee that full implementation will protect from all the attacks. It's possible that you fully implement, the maturity level is fine, but there is a mistake, and cybersecurity standards are not about full protection. It's about process and the life cycle of improving and defending, analyzing gaps, and constantly adjusting to the security risks and security threats. But standards makes us responsible for implementing the necessary security to prevent harm to our clients. And this is you could go through this. You could see it in the standards, and you could see it in laws and regulations. So recent law cases and recent cybersecurity laws give us this. So judges use duty to care notion to determine liabilities and data breaches. So companies do have to care, and a very interesting thing that FTC is basically taking a watchdog role, and if industry is not regulated by SEC, for example, or FINRA or FDIC or HIPAA, FTC would step up and say, okay, there is a breach, there are clients affected, so company needed to make sure that keep their customers out of harm. So they use this duty to care to push companies and prosecute companies and penalize companies for not securing customers' data. So again, we have like laws and regulations like Gdpr to clearly enforce certain things, or HIPAA. But again, if a company not regulated but by any of those government laws and regulations, or any agencies or laws, FTC will step up and try to penalize or understand what is going on. And latest FTC cybersecurity prosecutions are spectacular. Now, as I said, that judges are using this duty to care notion, and they basically say that companies must implement reasonable safeguards. And when we say reasonable, it's very vague and arguable term, and it's very hard to prove in the court that these safeguards are reasonable. And the way we explain to our clients, like if you implement any of the standards, and it wouldn't be, Michael's idea, or semantics idea, or like any cybersecurity company, but it would be ISO, it would be NIST, it would be PCI, SOC 2, high trust, whatever it is. That is much more reasonable than an opinion of CISO or a security engineer or whatever. So our suggestion is to take a standard and implement this standard fully. You could be in public cloud, you could be in private cloud, you could be in hybrid mode, but it's essential for companies to follow one of the standard. Standard doesn't need to be implemented from the very beginning to the very end. You could be on the path of implementing standard, but the whole cybersecurity program should be based on one of the standards, and they are all alike. People don't like them if they don't know them, and they say, oh, it's complex, it's bureaucracy, it's only check boxes. But we say that you get out of the standard what you how you working towards it. Because if you feel that this is bureaucracy, yeah, we'll put the check boxes, but if you live by the standards, they're there for the purpose. And if you live by them and understand them and just follow them, they're very easy. They are not complex. You could get lots of benefits out of standards, and we help people to select the right standard and show how they need to be implemented. So these are 5 basic standards and cons and pros. I can run through them very quickly, but I don't think it's a very big interest of the group. You could ask me questions about the differences and advantages, disadvantages of these standards. Cost is different. Some of them could be implemented like totally free, like ISO is certifiable, NIST is not certifiable, PCI is certifiable, AI, CPA, SOC is kind of certifiable. It's not a certificate, it's a report. High trust, very expensive, certifiable, very respected. So they all different in nature, and we consult companies what to implement. But all of them are implementable in public clouds, in AWS, and there are very good things that AWS implements to enforce and help companies to comply. And not just to comply, I will explain how what is the latest activities in AWS, for example, to help people. So AWS would cover probably from 45 to 55% of standard requirements for physical security, for controlling underlying hardware infrastructure. But they even go further and help people to comply with the rest of the controls. So again, just take the purpose of this slide is to basically compare the standards, and we can answer to questions like what is good for this particular client. But again, our suggestion, like, some kind of implementation of some kind of a standard is a must, even like to begin to start. You are moving to AWS, or thinking moving or to AWS, or you're in a hybrid mode. Everything should be done by one of the standards. This is Digital Edge methodology, how to implement standards, and I can run very quickly. So as I said, if you understand standards very well, you need to all of them are the same. So they all start with basic governance information, documentation. Then you have to do information classification, where you declare what information you have. You have privacy information, you have any medical information, what kind of information, and which system this information sits, and that information classification would be an input for risk analysis. Risk analysis, as we said, that is very important. By the way, I didn't mention, courts are taking risk analysis to define what is reasonable and what is not reasonable. So for example, there is a risk, but to mitigate that risk, it takes too much and will put you out of business. It's not reasonable to implement that safeguard. But if safeguard is not expensive, so the risk to mitigate a risk, and it's a cost. The cost is not prohibitive, then company must implement mitigation for a risk. So risk analysis is a cornerstone for definition of what's reasonable in cybersecurity and what is not. All cybersecurity standards are defining risk analysis and risk management processes and practices. So information classification, then based on information classification, you do risk analysis. Out of risk analysis, there is a control selection. So you have 5 risks, 50 risks, 500 risks, doesn't matter. You have to take controls out of the standard, and all standards are different in control definition, and you apply these controls to mitigate the risk. Then you have to document this. You have to write policies and procedures for control implementation. You implement technology. There are 2 types of controls. One is like technological control. You need to have an antivirus, for example. Or one is a procedural control, that you have to do review of your employees and access for employees quarterly. So that is procedural. Someone would have to do it. So technology implementation is not enough, but all the controls have to collect artifacts one way or the other. So if there is an antivirus, it has to be logged, and it has to be approved that this log is monitored. But if it is procedural control, then a person who is responsible for doing that has to write some kind of note, minutes, about the event or audit or review, and it has to be collected. Then security operations should be organized. So any alerts or anything what happens needs to be analyzed. Some people should be responsible for incidents, remediations, things like that. Once a year you have to do reviews, and you have to do either self-audit if it is not certifiable, or you could invite auditor. And this is basically the cycle that every year you have to do risk analysis. You reanalyze your risks, you adjust your control, and you analyze basically your posture. So any standards could be implemented with this methodology. Also, I want to talk a little bit about zero trust. It's very important, very hot topic, and AWS helps implementing zero trust even easier than on-prem. So just to give you an idea what zero trust, like, all people define zero trust differently, but zero trust is basically an idea, a goal. not even a methodology. It's basically how you build systems. So it's very funny to see when some vendors are saying, okay, we sell zero trust out of box. So it's kind of like very funny. And what zero trust is, so before we had offices, everybody was sitting in the offices, and we had some kind of directory where we defined users and their access permission. We had applications, and everything was in the perimeter. Then we started adding data centers in the picture, and we had directory service in the data center. We had multiple perimeters, but we still had perimeters. Then lately, especially with all startups today, we started seeing companies when it's 5 people and they start using Salesforce here, AWS there, they're talking on Slack, they use G Suite for communication and document sharing, they have GitHub for code repository, and different people have different access, and they create a product, they go on the market, and people start asking, guys, show us that you secured. And they like, what does it mean? And they give them Excel questionnaire asking them, okay, what is your termination process? And they don't have onboarding termination process. What is onboarding termination process? We have to go and make sure that we disable all the accounts everywhere where this user is, and the company doesn't even have, the startup doesn't even have list of all these services. It's like, it's impossible to pull this company together as an entity, because some guy just give access in the GitHub, and it's very, very hard to control access in such situation. So again, we had this idea, then we had perimeters and all the application perimeters. This is new vision of segmentation, and zero trust is all about control, about accessing different things, what you need, and that you have one single profile, and you have some kind of identity management process. And you could have your internal systems, or you have client-facing systems. So you need to have identity management for your public-facing systems, and they should have their own perimeters for each system. And your corporate system should be divided in separate segments, and you have to have workforce identity management systems. And products like Jump Cloud, like there are multiple products that provide this ability to create this third-party identity management. And certainly in traditional companies, we see things like Active Directory, but now we more and more see requests to implement this type of identity management, where you don't have perimeter, you don't have Active Directory, you don't have Microsoft-centric thinking. And this is where Okta or Jump Cloud basically play a serious role to when you log in, you basically ask Okta, I need to access this application. Do I have rights to access this application? And these providers helping to implement two-phase authentication, all the control over a password lifecycle and complexity, things like that. So we see more and more implementations of methodologies and architectures and paradigms like this. So and AWS helps segment this application very nicely. This is how we are segmenting certain applications in AWS. So we basically define each account or each VPC and different access control for different applications. And this is how we are creating security distribution in such segmented infrastructure, with securing on-prem and securing AWS segmentation. So we could talk a little bit more about it, but the idea is that we have to segment all this application. And a few slides about vulnerability management. So the problem with vulnerability in the public cloud, like everybody agrees that guys like AWS, like Azure, like Google Cloud, they do a very good job on securing themselves. And latest security incidents, they all happen because of mistakes of operators, of clients. Someone misconfigures something, and the agility of the cloud and configuration make it very hard to control and have visibility and alerting when something changed. So this this item is from like ISO about technical vulnerability, and ISO does not define how you need to control this vulnerability. Very vague statement, and you know, God knows how to do it in AWS, and without technology, it's very hard to control it. So the cloud velocity allowed to make changes very quickly. The enablement and agility of cloud environment add challenges to manageability, and key questions that companies should ask themselves: do we know who made the change? What was changed, and what additional risk would the change apply? And usually when development teams are controlling DevOps and operation, in a lot of cases, they care about the change. They don't care about the risk that the change would implement. And what Digital Edge is doing and explaining to companies that if before we had policies and procedures in a written form, with adoption of public cloud, we convince people that changes should not be applied through GUI. Changes should be applied through the code, because the whole idea and the whole benefit of public cloud is infrastructure as a code. So everything could be coded. So if there is if we have a policy saying that we have to secure a login with two-phase authentication, it's very easy to implement it as a piece of infrastructure code, as a coded configuration, and make sure that these configurations stay the same, because again, AWS allows to code any configurational changes, and through APIs we can pull and see that configuration is still on. So what we are saying, that instead of doing policies and procedures on documentation, and we verify those policies and procedures and actual practices once in a quarter, in public cloud, you could code your infrastructure, and you could have these policies and procedures as a code, and you could verify that all the configurations are done according to cybersecurity policies of the organization. I'm sure Sophos will be talking about it, and this is a quick slide about benefits of cybersecurity on AWS. Again, agility, infrastructure as a code is a very big thing, and we could verify and make sure that programmers don't do mistakes, or administrators, when apply the change, don't do any mistakes. So the organization implementing this automation can make sure that can be sure that the guardrails are implemented, and nobody can go outside of these boundaries that company set up through this automation. Also, one of the standard that we suggest people to use in the public cloud is CIS, and they have CIS benchmark, CIS controls. They have also have automation how to verify certain things that the configuration was done properly, and basically AWS use CIS controls, and they form AWS conformance pack, which basically define those guardrails. And there is a study that first 5 CIS controls fully implemented would prevent 90% of attack, 95. I'm sorry, implementing first 10 CIS controls would address 95% of recent attacks. So people just ignore these controls, but otherwise 95% of the attacks could be prevented. These are the examples of CIS controls. Also, I'm sure that AWS will be talking about Control Tower, but Control Tower is basically a mechanism to set up and multi-account configuration and make sure that segmentation for zero trust is achieved, and each group or each application would have its own configuration, its own policies, and its own procedure, and the implementation and the guardrails is set up. So this not new, but relatively new service out of AWS Control Tower allows companies to control their deployments and making sure that all the deployments are in compliance with certain standards. So I spoke about automation, and I am done with my presentation. Sorry, I ran a little bit longer than I was supposed to. So Sean, I think you could take over. And guys, you could send questions to a chat. Hello, Sean?
And can anybody hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Okay, very good. All right.
I stopped sharing, so you could share.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Let me share my screen. All right. Okay, so my name is Sean Wayne, Partner Management SA. I've worked with Digital Edge for the past half year to almost a year, and they have been a very aggressive partner that has gone from a select tier partner to an advanced tier partner, and they specifically focus on compliance and security. And I'm here to kind of talk about AWS Control Tower, which is one of the services that I work on internally as well. So without further ado, I'm gonna just dive into it. So Mike earlier mentioned about kind of having that governance and agility in place. So AWS Control Tower is able to give you that, right? Often what you see with organizations is that you may have a central compliance team that does everything from provisioning the VM to allowing a particular developer to have access to a particular service. While on the other hand, you may see organizations that just want to move fast, right, and be able to, especially the startups Mike mentioned, you may want to have developers to have mostly self-service requirements, self-service functions to provision, for example, VMs, containers, or serverless compute. Well, it's a trade-off, right? Before Control Tower came in, But now with Control Tower, it's giving you that access to have governance by the side versus in a way, so you can have both. We recommend customer deploying to a new environment to start with AWS Control Tower, but we also recommend that existing customer to use the power of Control Tower to extend governance into their legacy account and to implement Control Tower guardrails. And I'm going to talk about the guardrails, and also I'll talk about, of course, the config and conformance pack a little bit as well, to kind of talk why Control Tower is able to give you that governance, meeting that 50 to 55% compliance right off the bat. Some of the key features with AWS Control Tower is that you can automate a landing zone with best practices blueprints. So AWS Control Tower gives you right off the bat the best practices using AWS config. For example, configuration on not having a public S3 bucket, or that encryption on the EBS should be mandatory, for example. AWS best practice guardrails for policy management, it will give you right off the bat those config files, which gets applied to every single account that you set up. There's mandatory and there's optional. So you could enable optional configs as well as the manual ones that you create. Account factory for account provisioning, that's self-explainer. So basically what happens is that originally with, prior to Control Tower, you have to build your own account added into an AWS organization. And oftentimes organization may have a, for example, CloudFormation template to set up a landing zone or a network specific for that account. With Account Factory, you can automate account provisioning through a central account. There's dashboard for visibility and actions. You can see exactly how many accounts, how many organization units that have been provisioned under your organization. There's building identity and access management. If you are using other identity and access management, for example, Okta, we can integrate that with AWS single sign-on. Pre-config the log archive and the audit access to accounts. Often organizations have a compliance need to look at where to store the logs, and especially for auditing purposes. Now we have a log archive account to have all CloudTrail API being streamed over to this log archive account. So that makes it a lot easier for auditing purposes for organizations that have a compliance requirement. Built-in monitoring and notification, you are monitoring all accounts through the AWS config guardrail, as well as being notified when an account is non-compliant. And extensible third-party ISV solutions available via AWS Marketplace. Sophos is going to talk about their solution in a little bit. I will just leave this to Richard in a little bit. So AWS Control Tower, you really can think of it into two segments. One is account management, managing your accounts through AWS organization unit, as well as on the account level, you be able to set up your VPC, CloudFormation template that set up your customized environment if required, single sign-on, service catalog. The more important thing on the compliance side is the guardrail enforcement. Of course, you have the AWS config that's in place, but also as well as CloudWatch and CloudTrail enabling monitoring and alerting for non-compliant accounts, and AWS System Manager to manage all your EC2 instances. From working with thousands of customers, we have learned that there are really three aspects to achieving both business agility and the governance control. Customers can set up their environment, enable control, right, and operate at scale across all their resources in AWS. So let's kind of take a look at each one of them and see what they mean. Under setup, Control Tower enables you to set up an AWS landing zone, centralize your identity and access, establish guardrails for security, compliance, and operations, automate compliant account provisioning, and manage continuously over time. So if you're, your organization, especially if you're a startup that hasn't been focused on compliance, then you will have a compliance requirement, especially your fintech, right? That's where Control Tower is able to come in, especially being managed by a partner. You are able to gain all that benefits of being compliant and essentially managed through a central account. So whether you're building out your landing zone for the first time with the Control Tower or deploying to an existing organization, you are gaining access to all the automation and simplicity benefits that Control Tower offers. So I'll kind of talk about the capabilities and the use cases. Number one, use to centrally provision resources in a multi-account environment. So basically, if you have multiple teams and you have multiple accounts, you are able to share resources and control access to accounts, regions, and services, and have your teams quickly onboard to resources to innovate. Share resources and control access to accounts, regions, and services. You are able to organize your accounts into organization units based on, if you have finance accounts that specifically work with numbers, of course, you may have a more tighter regulatory requirement, and you could potentially group them under a organization unit that needs more compliance. Optimize cost and identify cost-saving measures. This will help you to essentially handle billing through a centralized account and have consolidated billing to take advantage of any discounts you may have with AWS. You are also able to set up your budgets and have your business units to be responsible for which account they have set up within their organization unit. And of course, but the most important is organization is able to have isolation, right? To minimize risk between accounts. Number two is really to have that control, right? Enabling control with AWS Control Tower. So there is really a journey, right? Going from either on-prem or starting from scratch over to AWS. If you're doing migration, right? Often what we see is you would build MVP or POC, and often you would want to have controls and guardrails in place so that your developers are not spending lavishly or not turning off instances when it's not being used. Network connectivity, identity management, which we talked about, observability, figuring out where your accounts are compliant or not compliant. All of that is already provided by Control Tower. So that's why if you are starting from scratch or migrating over to AWS, you should look at using Control Tower right off the bat. And as you scale, right, you have built your POC, you have done your MVP, and you have done some of the total cost ownership calculations, and then you have decided AWS is the right platform for your organization to migrate to. And then you would start creating a migration factory and extending observability to workloads. You would want to have central controls and guardrails to implement application service management. And often what you want to do is essentially the same thing, right? Control and guardrails, network connectivity, but at much more scalable manner. If you were doing it manually with 1 or 2 accounts, sure, you could do it, but with you know, tens and hundreds of accounts in your organization, if it's a big organization, it's going to take a lot of scaling effort. If you did it manual way, it's going to take a lot. It's going to be a headache. Number 3 is really innovation at scale or modernization, right? Customer can modernize and then migrate mission critical workloads by enabling cloud financial management, sourcing and distribution of software and best practices. And over here, sourcing and distribution is also important, right? You are able to integrate a lot of the ISV products with Control Tower, or do customization to allow your account be provisioned in a certain way that you want. And of course, if you are an existing customer, right, since you are already using AWS organization, you can use Control Tower to automate the management of some of the features and management to your multi-account strategy. So just taking a look at an example, right, to have a smooth transition before deploying Control Tower to your current organization, review some of the service quotas, for example, AWS config, AWS single sign-on, STS secure token service, control SCP service control policy. I won't dive into too deep into each one of those, but I'll give an introduction, right? Single sign-on allows you to have IAM, identity management access to, so that you have your organization to log on to AWS seamlessly. STS gives you a temporary credential service control policies applied on the organization level, which would allow you to have some kind of control in place. For example, you cannot have open SSH access, and SCP will automatically deny all instances within your organization or a particular OU organization unit. AWS config configuration management, which allows both on the account level as well as on the organization level, because now you have enabled Control Tower to allow you to manage the configuration and compliance of your entire organization. You are able to leverage AWS config to constantly and continuously monitor the compliance of your organization. And finally, CloudTrail allows you to track all API calls that's interacting with AWS. For example, if you don't want access to a particular database or a data warehouse which consists of your customer information, and any read APIs to a Redshift cluster would be logged in a CloudTrail, and you can or be notified when a unauthorized access has been hit. Okay, let's move on here. So I just have a little more pictures here. And then Control Tower, the last thing is really scale, right? You have set up your Control Tower, you have enabled control, and now your organization is growing. It's building a lot of services, microservices, or running services on the VM, for example. So there's 4 aspects to scaling, right? Number 1 is customers want to monitor and get visibility into how their resources and the application are being used and how they're performing. And they may want to make sure it's auditable, right? Everything from resources that are configured to which users are accessing them or what policies are being enforced. And third, they want to take operational action on those resources to manage them at scale, logically group them, and automate operational tasks safely and securely at scale. And this is what Mike was mentioning about conformance pack, right? So what you can do is you can have AWS configs rules set up for your individual accounts. And then within those accounts, once a configuration is non-compliant, you can have a Lambda function to automatically remediate the non-compliant resource, so that you never have to do any manual work by by going through it. For example, if you were on call before, you probably got a call early in the morning, late at night, especially you're on a trip and then somebody calls you, you're on call, and you have to go and fix it manually. Conformance pack is able to help you to take actions on resources that are non-compliant on the organizational level. And of course, they want to continually optimize and analyze to reduce cost, improve efficiency and security posture. And this is where the dashboard will come in. You will have a dashboard. I'll show you a picture on how the dashboard looks like in a little bit. And there is preventative guardrails, right? It's granular AWS policies and mostly governed by SCP. That's often applied on the organizational units and the accounts that under the organization unit, making sure that's always compliant. And there is the detective and the remediate guardrails. The reason why it's called detective and remediable guardrails is because those granular AWS policies applies through AWS config rules, and then you can integrate that with a Lambda function to automatically remediate those non-compliant accounts. So always a compliant means that you cannot do anything that is not allowed by the SAP, and you can be non-compliant here because once you do it, config rules is able to remediate. So you have some way to be non-compliant when it's detected or remediable. So take a look at what the difference is and then see if that applies and to your organization. Just taking some of the examples, right? While I'm talking about preventative and remediable guardrails, I wanted to give you some examples. So, a detective type, right? That could be enabling MFA for a root user, and it's strongly recommended. And you can or don't have to do it, but it's strongly recommended. Preventative will always be compliant, meaning that AWS Control Tower always enable AWS config in all available regions, and it's always mandatory, and you cannot turn it off. Okay, so that's kind of the difference. And then with Control Tower dashboard, I wanted to kind of show you how you can leverage this dashboard for your organization needs. Often you would see under the dashboard, you have organization units, how many units there are, and how many accounts are grouped under each organization unit. And there is preventative guardrails and detective guardrails, which we talked about. Preventative guardrails are always compliant, and detective guardrails could be non-compliant that we can remediate. And then you have a list of non-compliant resources. So this one, EC2, is basically currently violating the EBS encryption. Same thing here. And then this EC2 security group is disallowing internet connection. So basically, it's allowing the internet connection and it's non-compliant. And I will tell you which organization unit the non-compliant resources are in, so you are able to go into that particular account, right? Through, for example, this account is grouped under this organization unit, and this organization unit is showing non-compliant. And you would have a list of accounts here, basically showing non-compliant or compliant. And of course, this is something that you can apply on the organizational level, right? And have basically a dashboard figuring out which OU is constantly non-compliant. And then to enhance the control tower experience, what are some of the key features is really categorized into 3 categories here: cloud operation, security operation, and network operation. Going from the end to the first is you can and able to set up your CIDR ranges at the time of your account provisioning, so you can centralize your security network operations through Control Tower. You can set up your global security and compliance controls through both SCP and AWS config to allow and disallow certain API calls and actions. You are able to enforce guardrails for centralized security, and those two things here is probably the most important for anybody who's looking at security and compliance. And for cloud operation, you are able to integrate you are able to automate operations with integrated security services. This could include both the native AWS services like AWS Inspector, Guardrails, and AWS Macy, for example. You could set all of those up through setting up Control Tower, and you can scale with superior visibility and control. And being able to scale is probably the most important selling point for AWS Control Tower. Is that when you were building it manually, it took a lot of effort, but now with AWS Control Tower, you are able to be mostly hands-off approach and run your cloud operations. Here I'm just mentioning some of the lifecycle events. It becomes a little bit more involved as you go, start using Control Tower. Customers start asking things like, oh, can I customize this? Can I customize that? Yes, you can. You can support. We now support Terraform. We support CloudFormation. We support Ansible, Chef, Puppet. We do have customization allowed for event bridge integration, Lambda interoperability, custom configuration scripts. Like, for example, you want a number, you want your VPC to set up in a specific way. How many Lambdas is required at the time of start? If you want to set up, for example, confirmation packs, which doesn't come automatically with your AWS configs, you could set that up as a part of your customization with Control Tower using lifecycle events. So with AWS, the Control Tower is really giving you all of that compliance and security that's in place, and we are continuing to try our best to make sure security is in place with AWS, and it's our job zero. But there is a shared responsibility model, right? AWS is responsible for security of the cloud. However, a customer or you are responsible for security in the cloud. For example, we gave you the tools for IAM permissions, right? You would want to set it up in a specific way so that no unauthorized individual can leverage that IAM role to do certain things that you may not want them to do. And pricing and availability, it's generally available in Americas, APAC, including Australia, Singapore, India, Europe, and there's more regions that's coming up. There's no additional charge with using AWS Control Tower. You only pay for services that's underlying the Control Tower. So AWS config will cost you in terms of figuring out the configuration of your environment. CloudTrail also, if you're streaming CloudTrail events into the central archive log archive account, there's a cost to that. But Control Tower has no inherent cost. How do I get started? There is Control Tower workshops that DigitalEdge or Sophos may run along with AWS. So talk to both of them or talk to me. There is well-architected management governance lens. So with well-architected reviews that DigitalEdge currently runs, there is a specific lens on management and governance. They have gone through the well-architected onboarding, and they are able to run those workshops for you. So leverage them and to run a well-architected review for your organization. There's also blogs and YouTube channels. Please take a look at them and let me know if you have any questions. And thank you very much for coming and listening to my blurb. I will check if we have any questions. Okay, doesn't seem like there's any questions. Ralph, I will pass the torch to you.
Guys, and I wanted to tie things together. Again, this presentation is more for our partners, and we will be organizing these to like end clients, but some of the partners here are mostly in traditional IT infrastructure, and whatever Sean just explained, what can be done in AWS. AWS certainly enables lots of things to help clients to do things faster, better, but the same ideas could be implemented in traditional infrastructure or in hybrid infrastructure. So we see that AWS tooling are very convenient, and for traditional people, for traditional enterprise environments, things like utilizing S3 buckets or monitoring mechanisms or dumping logs on AWS, creating hybrid environments that are highly compliant and are easy to implement, and they don't have to move the whole stack on AWS. But you could enable them. You could say, okay, look, you run your production environment here, but it's much easier as a tool to utilize this or that service, because public cloud providers are really innovative today, and the thing is that we see migration from traditional environment to fully or partially public, or from public to back to data center, because sometimes when and we see, and I hope Sean is not going to kill me after that as a partner, but we see that when companies are running well-defined payload, and sometimes it's easier to run on hardware and cheaper to run on hardware. So we see migration going both ways. And but what the message I'm trying to convince, that these ideas for controlling and governing the IT environments are very important today. And when you tie everything what we say here and what Sophos will be presenting, when you tie with laws and regulations in the market today, I think it will resonate in all the conversations with our end clients. So yeah, let's go ahead and listen to Sophos' presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Let me go ahead and get my screen shared, and we will go ahead and get started. So my name is Ralph Bernard. I am on the global solutions team for our cloud security products. And so to kind of tie everything that we've discussed up until this point together into a practical way we can actually operationalize cloud security posture management with Sophos solutions specifically. We'll take a look at all of that here. So just a little bit about Sophos for anybody who's not familiar. Sophos started as an endpoint security company about 30 years ago. So we have been in the space for a very long time. And in that time, we've evolved from being more traditional endpoint security to a complete cybersecurity solution. We are now fully cloud native and have built tools and solutions that will assist DevSecOps teams with operationalizing their security posture management in their cloud estates. So the demo that we'll go through today is for Sophos Cloud Optics, which is our cloud security posture management solution. And it is multi-cloud compatible. And we will talk about all of the ways that Cloud Optics, integrates with existing tooling in AWS as well as Azure and Google Cloud Platform to consolidate security events or anomalous activity connectivity into a single pane of glass. So Cloud Optics is an agentless solution. When it's deployed, we're actually just onboarding the environment, utilizing a number of different scripts where we will create resources and leverage services that already exist in that cloud platform on the back end to ingest that data into our Cloud Optics API. And then we present that data here in your central tenant or in the customer central tenant, where alerts and events are prioritized through our AI and machine learning detection engines to basically organize the events and alerts for our security teams to action on. Taking a look at what types of alerts and what types of data we're ingesting. Of course, we will organize alerts and events based on their severity, but the data that we ingest is inclusive of compliance requirements or alignment, cloud governance, infrastructure as code vulnerabilities, as well as anomaly and artificial intelligence anomaly detections. And so as we're ingesting that data in, we do categorize each of those events with a severity and populate full details for those events into the Cloud Optics dashboard. And this allows us to manage security posture across multiple environments in a much easier fashion. One of the things that we've talked about quite a bit so far in this webinar are some of the AWS security best practices, for instance, with respect to AWS organizations and accounts. So one of the challenges that we're faced with in a cloud security posture management perspective is, how do we centralize visibility for all of those various accounts into, some single aggregation source that we can then present data to security teams so that they can then action on those items, whether it's through automated playbooks or, manual remediation through our SecOps teams. And so with Cloud Optics, because we are multi-cloud, not only can we ingest data from multiple AWS accounts within an AWS organization, and we have a number of various different methods for doing that, whether that's through Terraform, Terraform plans, CloudFormation templates, or AWS CLI commands. We can use the same or various methods or similar methods, at least for also onboarding Azure and Google Cloud Platform as well. And as you can see, we've got a number of different cloud environments populated here in this Optics dashboard, but we also have some infrastructure as code environments. And this is actually really, really important to go back to one of the other topics that was mentioned earlier in our webinar today. Which is the shift left paradigm, where we want to now extend security and vulnerability assessment for infrastructure as code so we can determine what those vulnerabilities might be or if there are any misconfigurations in our infrastructure as code deployments before we even deploy that infrastructure. And so by integrating our infrastructure as code environments as well as our cloud environments, we're really extending our cloud security posture management to be inclusive of shift left methodologies and concepts, as well as operationalizing and continuous monitoring and auditing of those cloud environments once we have them enrolled in Cloud Optics. So the data that we have access to, as I said, we only have read-only access to each of the cloud environments. So we're not writing any changes. We're just reading log data. In the case of AWS, it's CloudTrail events as well as VPC flow logs. We do the same thing for Azure and Google Cloud Platform, and then we ingest that data and present those alerts right here in this dashboard. The other thing that we're aiming to do with a cloud security posture management solution, as we said, is provide that visibility. So we present our network topologies for all of our cloud environments in a very easy to digest, easy to manage format. So our VPC topology that's generated here is generated automatically once we've actually onboarded our accounts into Cloud Optics. And we can drill down into each of these VPCs and view which resources or what assets are currently running in each of these VPCs. We can also filter based on security groups. So are we allowing traffic inbound or outbound? And if so, what is the traffic that is currently being applied? Or what are the security group rules that are being applied? In this case, we actually have no security groups attached to this particular VPC. And then we also do the same thing for our IAM accounts. So again, kind of going back to one of the other topics that was mentioned earlier in the webinar, if we have multiple AWS accounts with multiple IAM users, and even if we're using federated access and single sign-on, to centralize our access controls, as well as have better auditing and visibility into access to our cloud resources, we can filter these objects as well, not just based on IAM users or user groups, but we also have the ability to filter based on assumed roles. And so this actually gives us quite a bit of visibility, a lot going on here, as we can see. To determine what our access relationships look like with various roles or even IAM user accounts. And one of the nice things that this type of visibility allows us to be able to do actually is if we're attempting to implement least privilege access across our entire environment, because of the very simplistic way that this is actually presented here in the optics dashboard, we're also able to view what roles or which users have overprivileged access. So if we switch back to our IAM users and we'll leave our overprivileged access enabled, so let's toggle that back off. My sidebar went missing. Let's switch back here and then we'll take a look at that again. Sorry about that, everyone. So we'll select our IAM user and we can view in our overprivileged details here what services this user has had access to and what services they've used in the last 12 months. So this does make it very easy for us to actually implement least privilege access for any accounts that may have gone unnoticed as being potentially overprivileged. And in fact, we do even provide remediation recommendations to apply that best practice or remediation action for, in this case, overprivileged IAM accounts. So if we click on the View and Update Access button there, we can see what services this account currently has access to. And if we want to move these services to services that are no longer accessible for that user, now we can see what the AWS CLI commands are that we can execute to apply that least privilege model to the roles or the IAM accounts. Now, that's a manual remediation implementation for, in this case, overprivileged users, but we absolutely have the ability to also automate remediation actions. And as I said, because we only have read-only access to the environment, our remediation implementations are going to be based on various integrations that we actually already have built into the optics console. So if we are ingesting AWS Security Hub data, which would include AWS Macie or Amazon Inspector, we can then build out automated remediation actions based on those findings in Security Hub, either via our webhook integrations or if we want to trigger an SNS notification for those specific events, so that we can alert our security teams to some misconfiguration or some aspect of our security posture where we may want to have manual intervention implemented in that place or in that case. And then additionally, we have our own, well-documented RESTful API via the Sophos Cloud Optics API, where we can also egress that event data out to a third-party SIEM or source solution. One of the other things that is coming to Sophos Cloud Optics is a addition with another solutions a company that we actually acquired earlier this year called Refractor, which allows security operations teams to implement automated remediation actions in a no-code or low-code platform. And that ETA for when that technology stack will be integrated with the optics platform, I currently don't have that data, but I can certainly find that out and make that available to everybody in the webinar later on, either via email. In addition to the visibilities with our IAM visualization here, one other quick thing that I want to point out as well is that we did also recently implement the same IAM visibility visualizations for Azure accounts as well. So this again allows us to identify our account and role access with various services in Azure. And the same functionality will be coming for GCP. So that's one of the things we're also actively working on, is to extend our feature parity for all cloud environments within the optics platform. While we definitely want to know about our network topologies as well as our IAM visualizations for access controls and just viewing what overprivileged services or overprivileged accounts we might have. Our inventory management here does also allow us to summarily view what assets we have, whether those are compute resources, containers, storage resources across multiple cloud environments. And then we can drill down into specific assets. So any hosts, and these would just be compute instances in either Azure, AWS, or GCP. Networking, containers as well, storage, and then any serverless functions. And so this does allow us to actually centrally aggregate all of those events, again, including our Security Hub findings and our Amazon Inspector findings, to also use the data or the alerts that are generated in the optics console as our centralized point for initiating any security remediation actions. Flow log data does also allow us to, and let's take a look if we have any. Doesn't look like we have any flow log data currently in this account, but this does also allow us to leverage the same anomaly detection, artificial intelligence that we're applying for all of the other ingested data to identify any suspicious network traffic, whether that's to proxies, spam sources, phishing campaigns, malware hosting, or other exploited web services or IP addresses that are associated with any of these activities here as well. And then another new feature we just added with our activity insights is our anomaly detection for user behavior anomalies. So this does allow us to automatically determine any behaviors or activities, events, task executions performed by any of our users within our cloud environments to identify any suspicious or anomalous behavior. And we will flag on anomalous behavior based on whether or not the typical behavior deviates from the normal behavior we've observed by the user, or whether actions were occurred outside of the normal working hours of that particular user. We'll also flag on suspicious connections. So if we've got an initial connection for a particular user from the UK, and then very shortly after another connection for the same user from India, we'll flag on those events as well. And within each of the anomaly detections that we're generating here in the optics console, if we drill down into each of these specific actions or events, we can get into the metadata for all of these events as well, to get more information to assist with either determining, is this legitimate, or is this something that we need to investigate further? Now, while the cloud security posture management tools with Cloud Optics do provide a lot of valuable information. And of course, this is hugely critical for operationalizing that security posture management in the cloud. We are also able to ingest this data into our extended detection and response platform, which is specifically designed to allow security teams and security analysts to perform investigative threat hunts or forensic analysis for various activity or behavior. And so with the combination of the anomaly detection data that we're finding here, we can then pivot from the whatever specific pieces of data we're finding here. Maybe it's a odd user agent that we typically don't see for that user's activity. We may use that user agent data to then pivot to our XDR platform to now initiate a threat hunt to determine, have we had any other resources affected or changes within our cloud estates? And it appears I'm timed out here, so I'll log back in. Have we had any other changes for that specific user agent or that access ID or access token? What other changes are associated with those events that we can then investigate across the rest of our cloud environments as well? So, with a lot of organizations moving to the cloud, of course, one of the biggest challenges is, getting the visibility into those environments so that we can, really understand what our security posture looks like across, especially in multi-cloud environments, or in the case of multiple accounts within AWS or multiple subscriptions within an Azure account. Having visibility into all of those resources and having a centralized place to determine what our access controls look like, to audit security events within those environments is hugely, hugely critical to ensuring our security posture in the cloud. And so with that said, I mean, we're really just building a solution, or have built a solution that is intended to give customers, organizations, and security teams the right tooling, in addition to having access or being partnered with the right partners or right people to actually implement those security best practices and to minimize our potential exposure for security events in the cloud. And with that said, that's really all I wanted to touch on for everyone today in this demo. If anybody does have any questions, I know we're going to do questions or a Q&A here in just a few moments. So I definitely look forward to fielding any questions that come up. So I'll hand it back over to you now, Greg.
Great, thank you so much, Ralph. Let me share my screen here. Let me know if you guys can see the presentation or not.
Yeah, I can.
It's all good.
All right, thanks. All right, so I just briefly wanted to cover, I wanted to end the presentation with a little bit about us as DigitalEdge and kind of who we are and some solutions that we offer, as well as some use cases that we have. So diving into the AWS and Sophos solutions, as Sean had previously mentioned, DigitalEdge, we are AWS Advanced Tier Consulting Partners. We are also Sophos Managed Service Provider and Cloud Service Provider Partners. DigitalEdge does field a very deep team of subject matter experts with focus on, and this isn't an all-inclusive list, but we focus on AWS cloud architectures and migration, managed services, including cybersecurity and DevSecOps, and cybersecurity and privacy compliance in public clouds. Along with that, we do offer some tangible solutions, mainly in AWS Marketplace. So we have a Cyber Regulator, which is our proprietary GRC platform listed there. And then utilizing that Cyber Regulator platform, we offer a professional service for ISO 27001 implementation and certification within AWS. We also have a professional service in AWS Marketplace for managed Sophos Cloud Optics implementation. And along with that, we provide a cybersecurity assessment and remediation. And in our pipeline, we're planning to introduce more standards and more certifications on AWS Marketplace as professional services. The next one is going to be OSPAR, but keep an eye out as we keep kind of pushing those out. And then jumping into some case studies and success stories. So the first one we wanted to cover is Cis Controls Implementation. So we had a digital marketing company that came to us. They asked us to assist them with their ISO 27001 audit. And within that, they needed help addressing vulnerabilities within their AWS environment. So we utilized the CIS control benchmarks, and we implemented them for that client via a script for Linux server hardening within their AWS environments. The outcome of that, of course, was that the organization successfully passed their certification, and now we can continue to add more scripts as needed as they continue to add more servers to their AWS environment. Following that, we did implement Control Tower and CIS controls for a very large fintech company. So they have over 20 AWS accounts, and one of their main goals was to create landing zones for centralized management. And along with that, they wanted to integrate CIS hardening, but they wanted it to be automated so that we wouldn't have to go in every time and implement scripts where needed and assess vulnerabilities constantly every time they raise up a new environment. So what we did was we implemented Control Tower, and we implemented CIS hardening into their AWS DevOps delivery pipeline. So now that whenever they raise new environments or implement new features into their AWS environments, utilizing that delivery pipeline, it already comes pre-hardened. And so, like I said, they can now easily deploy AWS organizations and environments that meet compliance and centralized management needs. And being a fintech company, they are under very, very high scrutiny from numerous different compliance and standard angles. And so this really helps them ease the process of meeting those requirements. And finally, this is something that wasn't really covered in our presentation, but we do also utilize some third-party tools for vulnerability management, and one of those is Nessus. So for a different fintech, for multiple fintech companies, actually, they have multiple AWS accounts, and they wanted to verify if there were any existing vulnerabilities. So we deployed that Nessus AWS compliance scanners to make sure that we could identify vulnerabilities and address them within the CIS L1 compliance checks. And so after we got that report back from the Nessus scanner, Digital Edge applied the necessary remediations to successfully address any identified vulnerabilities within their environments. Not included in this presentation, just to mention some things we're working with for Sophos, we do have a very large POC that's been ongoing for about a couple of months now for a major fintech company, kind of integrating cloud optics, the Sophos endpoint and server protection solutions, as well as the Sophos firewall solutions to kind of allow them to better manage all their AWS environments and address vulnerabilities within one centralized platform, such as the one that Sophos does offer. So this is kind of the end of our presentation. Are there any questions from any participants? Are there any points that people want to know more about from Digital Edge, or from Sean with AWS, or from Ralph with Sophos?
Greg, so guys, again, it was for partners, and it was tuned for partners, and we basically started talking about things that will be hot next, I don't know, 2-3 years, and could be implemented in AWS in hybrid mode, and also in standard in traditional enterprise environments. So we are not specifically pushing anyone. I mean, we are very close with AWS, and we're close with Sophos, but for us, it's more way of thinking and way of educating clients what potential problems that may have if they don't use this, or don't think about this, or you don't implement things like that. So for us, it's more way of thinking, where we go, and try to give a value in consulting services to our clients. So I guess we can close it. You have all our contacts. We'll talk directly. We'll run more of these presentations for clients and for partners. But if you think that we could provide some materials like additional, maybe like one-pagers, maybe you know, I think we find that all the legal presentation that I gave you before, and again, we have a cybersecurity lawyer on our team. We could package it and say and give it to you, so you could use the same language and the same ideas. Guys, do you how do you know that what you implement as a cybersecurity is reasonable? How do you know that whatever you do will hold in court if, God forbid, something happens? Do you know what to do in the case of cybersecurity breach, who to notify? So these things are very, those sounds are resonating in our clients' ears, and I hope you know, it could be a good selling, points for you to help to push this ideas and methodologies. So I think we're good for this webinar. Thank you very much for attending. You have our contacts. Please share your thoughts, your ideas.
Yeah, I
within
also just
minutes.
wanted to mention, sorry for interrupting. I also just want to mention a big thank you for everyone for attending, and a big thank you to Sean from AWS and Ralph from Sophos for taking the time to present with us and work with us as partners.